Good morning, everyone. We'll get started so we don't overlap into the sessions. People will still be coming in. They're lined up a bit in the back of the parking lot, but we'll get this moving. So thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate everyone being here again, and I hope yesterday was a fantastic day, informative, and you were able to get some golden nuggets to take back to your classroom or your office at the school board or in the higher ed areas. And I want to thank you again for all of your support and for all of the vendors on the floor who allowed this to happen. My name's Dino Miele. I'm the CIO of the District School Board of Niagara, and you're making this conference so proud that it was recognized, as our director said, by the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and he sent us a letter of thank you to keep pushing the envelope, moving it forward, especially in the areas of education and health. And so we're proud that you're here to support it. And we'll hope you'll leave with some good things to take back to the students in our classrooms throughout Ontario and Canada, and also from our visitors from the US and UK and the other areas. So thank you very much. I have a great honor of introducing three great gentlemen today that'll be up here to say a few words. The first one is our Mayor of Niagara Falls, Mayor Jim Diodati. He is 110% behind all of this work because he believes in an innovative, smart region program. He believes in education and making sure that all of us in the communities have what we need when it comes to the requirements to make it a 21st century area. So without further ado, I'd like to bring to the stage our Mayor, Jim Diodati.
Thanks, Dino. Good morning, everyone. Oh, come on. Are you kidding? Is that all you got? Let's try this again. Good morning, everyone. Oh, that is so much better. Think about where you are. You're in Niagara Falls, at one of the great natural wonders of the world, on a gorgeous, sunny morning. I'm told it's going to be 28 today. You're going to see, if you take a break around just after lunch, you'll see a phenomenal full rainbow cresting right across the falls. What a place to be. What a great place to have your conference. I think it's terrific. How many people here are in Niagara Falls for the first time? Show of hands. Quite a few people. Well, congratulations and welcome to Niagara Falls. You can check that off your bucket list. You know, we're so fortunate here in Niagara Falls, and as the mayor, I get to bring greetings to conferences from all over the world. And I understand today we're represented by some 30 countries from all over the world. And what a neat idea. This crazy idea that Dino and a small group of people had, that somehow there was a connection between technology and education. You know, and I remember my kids at one time when their cell phones were banned from class, and now they're required for class. How far we've come. And what a great opportunity to celebrate. And I'll tell you the response. This small group of people, they don't even advertise, and they have to shut off the registration. We get 2,000 people from all over the world wanting to come to this event. How about a big hand for the smart people that put this idea together? And my job, and we want to make sure that we've hooked up our trailer to Dino and his team, because we want to go where he's going. We're working here in Niagara Falls to turn Niagara Falls not just into a smart city, but a brilliant city. We want to bring high-speed internet to every corner of the city. So no matter where you live, no matter what your socioeconomic status is, we want to make sure that every kid, that every family has access to the internet so they can do their homework, start their business, and they can plug into what's going on with technology. Because some of the brightest minds are out there just waiting to be discovered. And it's our job to make sure that we bring that education and that technology together so that we can absolutely take advantage of this wonderful opportunity. So my job is to invite and welcome you to Niagara Falls. 14 million people come every year to Niagara Falls, and we love to roll out the red carpet for all of our guests. So one thing I like to do, I test a little bit of a joke out on my kids in the morning before school, just to see how it goes over. Today I got some really good moans, so I'm going to test out a joke this morning. Is that okay? Yeah, you might as well go with it because I'm doing it anyway, so work with me here. So a patient goes into his doctor and says, doctor, you got to help me. I think I'm shrinking. He says, I'm really worried. I think I'm shrinking. And the doctor says, just relax. You're going to have to be a little patient. Yeah, okay. You can moan all you want. Okay, that's fine. But when you use it later today, you make sure you give credit to who's your daddy? Mayor Diodati. So I'll leave you with a couple of bits of information. For those of you that are interested in historical and cultural tourism, Niagara Falls, right where you're sitting right now, just over 200 years ago, we were fighting the Battle of 1812. As a matter of fact, the bloodiest battle that was ever fought on Canadian soil happened right here in Niagara Falls, the Battle of Lundy's Lane. We've got an incredible Niagara Falls History Museum. We've got a cemetery with some very important people there, from Laura Secord, and the list goes on and on. This area was key. It was fundamental. And of course, it's not that we celebrate a war so much as we celebrate the outcome. And the outcome has been 200 years of peace, 200 years of the world's largest unmilitarized border, and we think Canada is a good example for the rest of the world, how you play nice in the sandbox. So I'd like to welcome all of you today, and just before I officially welcome you, two things I'd like to do. One, a little survey. How many people have made it to one of our casinos already? Just show hands. Show hands. All right. I'd like to thank you personally for your donations to the city. We appreciate it. The potholes don't fill themselves, and it's because of your support that we're able to give those potholes a lot of attention. Second thing, and this is a little tidbit, my friend who's going to be coming on the stage shortly from Brock University, Mr. Brian Hutchings, asked me if I was going to mention about the negative ions. So he loves it when I tell this story, so I'm going to tell you. A little bit of tidbit of information I'm going to give to you that you may not be aware of, you probably are not aware of. Now, I know you're into technology, obviously. Don't Google this now. Google it later. Negative ions. Niagara Falls has the highest concentration of naturally occurring negative ions anywhere on the planet. This is the place where 20% of the world's freshwater flows from the Great Lakes. This is an absolutely incredible place to experience and negative ions do a positive thing for health, well-being, energy, vitality. So if you feel you've got an extra kick in your step when you're in Niagara Falls, there is no accident. We are giving you a full supply of negative ions for free, and it's our way of saying thank you for your donations at our casinos. So on behalf of the city of Niagara Falls, I want to welcome all of the delegates. The main takeaway, it's got to be a productive conference. Tell your friends and your colleagues about this conference, and make sure for next year you register early so you're not disappointed and you're not given the notice that you can't come in because there is no room. So on behalf of the city of Niagara Falls, have a great conference, enjoy your stay, and make sure you come back with the rest of your family and friends and spend lots of money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Jim. My next introduction is another partner that has been close to us from the beginning, and it's the Ministry of Education. And it's my honor to introduce Bruce Rodriguez, the Deputy Minister of Education, Early Learning, and Childcare.
Thanks, Dino. Good morning, bonjour, Annie, bonjour. Let me first start by acknowledging that Niagara Falls is located on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples dating back countless of generations. I want to show my respect for their contributions and recognize the role of treaty making in what now is Ontario. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were formed, they are still relevant today. I would like to begin by thanking the Connect 2017 organizing team for inviting me here today. It's a great pleasure to be with so many of you involved in education technology and committed to the well-being and success of all of Ontario's students. I am pleased to bring greetings from Minister of Education Mitzi Hunter, who was unable to be here today as the budget will be released in the House. Minister Hunter and the ministry are very engaged on the topics before you today. Delivering better outcomes for our children and students is a goal that we all share. I'm always proud to talk about the tremendous progress Ontario has made towards creating a world-class education system from early years to grade 12 and beyond. I have seen and experienced it from many vantage points throughout my career. Recently, I had the opportunity to attend the International Summit on the Teaching Profession, and I can assure you that the world's leading jurisdictions continue to look to Ontario as a model. At the conference, I engaged in conversations with education leaders across the globe. Many of these leaders wanted to meet with us and partner with Ontario to learn about our education system. Because what we do in education and how we do it is valued across the world. We are one of the leading jurisdictions in being able to integrate high academic standards, twinned with a deep sense of well-being and belonging, and an education system that educates all students. Other countries look to us to learn from, and conferences like this only solidify our learning and stretch our thinking. As many of you know, in 2014, the government released a renewed vision for the future of education in Ontario. Students, educators, parents, business leaders, and community organizations all played a guiding role in developing Achieving Excellence, a renewed vision in education for Ontario. The vision sets out 4 ambitious goals: achieving excellence, ensuring equity, promoting well-being, and enhancing public confidence. It is this vision that guides our efforts to ensure our education system meets the needs of today's learners. And to that end, we are paying special attention to the renewed math strategy. Something I don't need to convince this group is of utmost importance in the years to come. We're also being attentive to well-being, early years and childcare, and finally, a highly skilled workforce. The world in which we and our students are growing up is evolving at a rate and pace faster than any previous generation. Our students' ability to not only understand technology and be adept at using it, but to interact with it and raise questions about how we use it is essential and paramount if we are to ensure that it does not control us. There are many opinions on how best to move forward and help our students succeed within a technology-driven space. We continue to see a variety of technologies playing an increasingly significant role in the classroom. We witness success particularly when technology aligns with our world-renowned curriculum and works in tandem with the right learning tasks to create authentic, real-world learning experiences and rich, culminating, integrated tasks. Our students are global citizens. If we are still referring to 21st century skills, we are about 17 years behind. We need to be exploring the space of global competencies and innovation. In this fast-paced, changing world, we can't rest on what we've already accomplished, because if we think we have arrived, we're probably about 5 years behind. In such a space, our students will require a wide range of tools and skills in order to adapt and thrive in a technology-driven world, one that will challenge them and us to use technology as a means to an end and not an end in itself. One wherein we will need to teach them to explore complex questions so as to ensure that through technology, we will be able to collectively reduce our carbon footprint, embrace sustainability, and raise ethical questions when technology is used to support unjust practices. Moving forward requires us to work together and focus our energies on creating the best opportunities for our students. So I ask that you leave this conference committed to thinking critically about what you can do to help create a future in Ontario education where through the ethical use of technology, we can break down barriers, build bridges, enhance accessibility, affirm safe spaces, and support students and staff in creating a culture where the best of what technology can be is valued. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Thank you, Minister Rodriguez. Appreciate it. All right, our next guest and partner who's been with us for many, many years is Brock University, and I have the pleasure of introducing Brian Hutchins, the Vice President of Brock University.
So I guess I'm the last speaker here today, and it's been very interesting being backstage with the mayor of Niagara Falls and talk about negative ions and Schumann theory, somebody else was talking about back there, and we're doing yoga back there and everything else. So it's many things going on behind stage. Brock University is about 15 minutes away from here. We don't get the luxury of getting those negative ions being 15 minutes away. We're the only school that is actually in North America that's UNESCO Biosphere. We're on the Niagara Escarpment in the Brow, and we take that quite seriously. We have 92 programs at Brock, undergraduate programs, 45 master's programs, and 13 PhD programs. Over 18,000 students at Brock University. We're considered a mid-sized university in the province of Ontario. One thing I like to brag about, we have the second most wins, people don't realize this, nationally and provincially in Canada, of any university in Canada in sports. Because we don't have a football program, people don't think we have a major sport program. We have amazing wrestling and basketball and rowing and baseball programs, and we have the second largest co-op in Ontario. We're very fortunate here today to be working with the DSBN and iHub and the Connect Conference. We're very fortunate in Niagara. We have 4 or 5 major organizations, the Catholic School Board, the District School Board of Niagara, the Niagara Health System, as well as Brock University and Niagara College, that actually have formed a CIO consortium. They work together on various things such as data storage, on security. We have a shared security officer that we work with together, and we've combined our efforts to make the IT infrastructure in the Niagara region, the wireless infrastructure, much, much stronger, as well as we're currently working on a proof of concept to build a cloud platform that connects all these partners that eventually connect the broader community. So we're very happy today to support the SWIFT initiative in the region, and SWIFT is funded by the Government of Ontario, and it'll bring high-speed internet to homes and businesses across the Niagara region in southwestern Ontario. I'd like to thank everyone for coming to this conference. It's growing and growing and growing, and enjoy your stay in the Niagara region. Thank you.
Sorry.
Technology, love it, eh? My honor is to introduce our inquiry ninja now, Tiffany Poirier. She's a national award-winning educator, author, and parent who believes in the power of questions and the infinite gifts of every child. Driven by curiosity, passion, and a quest, she's been on since an early childhood tragedy. Tiffany began her teaching career listening closely within her students and with them, and asked them the same kinds of questions that kept her on her young mind awake at night when she was pondering. What is happiness? What is real? How can we make the world a better place? So without further ado, I welcome Tiffany on the stage.
Thank you. Good morning. Now, I know some of you are wondering a question about this, whether this is a 2-for-1 deal today, and it is. I promise you, although today is pregnant with possibility, we are only going to give birth to big ideas today. And I am 30 weeks, and I'm expecting a little boy, and it'll be my second. So thank you very much. If I need to rest a little bit. So the most interesting thing to me, I couldn't believe this, is thinking about how in this room, I hear conservatively we've got about 2,000 people at this conference, and maybe in this room 1,000 people right now. And if we think about it, you've got maybe average of 10 years professional experience. Many of you have 20, 30 years. If we just think conservatively, 10 years of experience in education times 1,000 people, that's 10,000 years of wisdom in this room. So if you could just give yourselves a clap. There's so much energy and excitement in this conference, and it is a true honor and privilege to be here, a part of it. And I thank you guys for coming up and making me feel welcome, and for all your great big questions. And it makes me wonder as I look out into this group, like, what are all the stories of the people here? What's your passion? What are you interested in? We have this common thread. We're passionate about questions. I'm passionate about big questions, the questions my students have been asking and coming up and pulling on my sleeve, questions that I collect in a question jar, almost like some people collect stamps. I collect kids' big questions, and then like to give them time to have dialogue circles and to explore their own big questions in the classroom or outside on the grass. So here's some questions from a class of regular grade 4 and 5 students. What does it feel like to fly? Why do buses not have seatbelts? Why are there wars? These kids are unprompted, so they're just coming up with these on the spot at the beginning of the school year. Will I be a hero one day? Who am I in Sid or inside? Is there another me on Earth? Do we have a porpoise? Now, I had to check. We did not have a class porpoise as a pet. Do we have a purpose? Do I have a purpose? Kids ask, a research study found about 288 questions per day. And you probably know this from how they're tugging on your sleeves, especially those young ones. So what does that look like? Why is the sky blue? Why is the sky blue? Why is the sky blue? Does it feel like that? That's how it feels. My son is 6 years old, and sometimes this can be overwhelming. And I'm like the question teacher, and I really want to empower it, but sometimes it can be exhausting. So what do you do? When you were a kid, did you ask a lot of questions? Did you verbally externalize that? This is me when I was a kid, always wanting to know why, how, when. I didn't stop. I remember when I was in my teaching education program, I asked a lot of questions. And one of my education professors said, "Tiffany, you ask too many questions." And I thought of another question. Is that a problem? So I didn't stop because I think teaching is questioning. I think questioning is teaching. And so today, let's explore effective questioning. What does that really mean? And some tools, strategies, and a roadmap so that we can find our own questions and help our students to do the same. So my goal with this is to be as practical as possible. We're going to explore our story, our collective story, my story, your story. Who were we as questioners? Who have we become? How can we deepen that? And then go into the toolbox, because I need stuff, I need things. You can see my experience in primary. Like, I gotta have a toolkit, things to help bring it to life, and then a map. So I also wanted to make sure that this presentation could be kind of like a pop-up book where if you open this flap, then more things fall out because there's only so much we can do here in 50 minutes. So I've got this PDF for you that's like an ebook that you can download so that you can have something to print off and use on Monday morning if you'd like. You can share it with your students. You can have them use the roadmap, the 50-plus questioning strategies. Because I know when I go somewhere, I'm always thinking, okay, thanks for the philosophy, but now what do I do? So this, I hope, will give you something practical to use. So we often go to this definitional thing. So what is a question? So it's a sentence, a phrase, or gesture in an interrogative form. So it might just be phrased in a certain way, like the tonality, in order to get some information in reply. But we know that questions are expressions of curiosity, they're central to learning, they're instructional clues, and they are a pathway to meaning. So all kinds of benefits that research is proving that happen when kids are doing questioning in the classroom. They can do all this stuff. We don't need to read slides here. And we know that the world is complex, and your students are facing things like this. They're coming into our classrooms with all this complexity. And so we can't keep them in a bubble, especially now. So what can we do? We can empower them to harness their power to question. So our story. We'll go down the rabbit hole, and I invite you to think about who you were as a questioner when you were a little girl, a little boy. What were you wondering about? So that's me at age 0. And we kind of think in this mentalese even before we have language. We're looking at this world with those big questioning eyes, like, who am I? What is this place? Wow, I have a hand. What does this mean? Who are these people? So that's me and my mom and my dad. They're teenagers, you can see. And I mean, look at the feathered hair. You can see the satin shirt and the, I don't know what that vest is. Why are they dressed like this? Big questions. How do I be a good big sister? I remember we were extremely poor and we were on welfare, and there were some times where we didn't have the change to get on the bus to get to the food bank. And I distinctly remember my father making flour and water pancakes for dinner one night. And that filters into your mind and your questions. I remember being 5 and getting the news that my dad, who had been a forest firefighter in training, the helicopter crashed. What does this mean? New questions, big existential questions that I would face at an early age, that your questions that you're getting asked from these young kids. Maybe you went through something that made you shift your worldview when you were really young. So as I grew up and I kept questioning and pestering my teachers with all of these questions, and I finally became a teacher, and I thought, well, what am I going to do to help my students feel that their questions are safe in class, that they can ask? Because I remember as a kid, I felt, we're really busy cutting and gluing and pasting, but I kind of want to know what the meaning of life is. But it didn't really seem to come up a lot. So I started stepping back, actually, and just letting the kids have that time and building it in and realizing, oh, this crazy lesson plan that I worked so hard on with perfectionist tendencies is not going to come close to the magic of just inviting the kids into a safe space and letting them choose one of their own questions to dialogue about. So we started doing this. I created this book, Q is for Question, inspired by my students to as a way to say, I see your questions, I honor them. Things were going great. I was finally feeling like I was coming into my own. I'd still hear from colleagues things like, well, some kids just can't question well. Maybe those are kids in your class. You got a great crop this year, Tiffany. But the thing is, it's a myth. Every single kid, every single person can be an amazing questioner. This is what we do. This is who we are as beings. We are questioning beings. So I set out to prove that this was true. Here's a group of grade 4 and 5 students sharing their questions at the beginning of the year. Keep in mind, this is an inclusive group. We've got kids of all abilities, some who are on significantly modified programs, some who are demonstrating that they're very gifted. They've got this huge range of backgrounds, cultures, and yet there's an equalizer when it comes to questioning. Did we play? Okay. There we go.
How does the brain work? Is there other Earth-like planets?
What made people want to be president or prime minister?
Why was math created?
How does medicine heal you?
Why are we human?
Why do so many people kill animals? Why is there food?
Why do you need water to survive? Who created language?
Why is there a sun? How do I talk?
Why are there swear words?
What would happen to us if the sun disappeared?
Why are there wars?
What's the meaning of life? Why do you have to die?
Why do we have happiness? How does it feel to fly? Is there life on other planets?
Do you have to have a religion? Do we have a purpose?
Who am I?
Why is there sky?
Who is God? Do unicorns exist?
What happens when we die?
Is heaven real?
Why can't pigs fly?
So, in 1 minute of passing around a microphone to students who were not prompted, I have all the inquiry questions that we could need for a year, for a lifetime. I didn't have to sit at home. I mean, these kids will do your homework for you in getting ready for that critical thinking in class. So I started to share what I was working on and asking for support from other people. There was a course that I took on how to do philosophical dialogue with kids, and things were getting going, and I was feeling really good. The book had just come out. And you know how when you get to that place where things just seem to work, sometimes life throws you a curveball. I was 5.5 months pregnant, and I lost my first child. So in that moment, I knew that I had this sense of meaning, and it was tenuous. My life had been bookended by death, the loss of my father, and then the loss of my first child. In the middle was all this great meat of all this good stuff that had happened. But in that loss, in that grief, I was starting to lose myself and even the passion for the questioning. I just remember drawing the curtains and the darkness. The sun was even offensive to me. It was like, don't be so sunny. And then this strange phone call came about 3 weeks in, after not even wanting to see or hear the word kid or child. And it was this journalist from my university alumni magazine who wanted to do a story about kids and questioning. And I thought, oh gosh, don't bother me with this now. I am not into anything. And I finally was coaxed to come out of my shell and go down to a coffee shop and sit down with this nice journalist. His name was Tom. He was a very kind, patient person. And this was sort of my first outing when I was experiencing this loss. But I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. So this is a picture from that actual moment. I'm sitting there kind of in the shadows. I'm holding this book like, yes, this happened. Yes, I remember a former life of joy. He starts to ask me questions. Clever. What's it like being a teacher? Simple, innocuous questions. But now the tables are turned. I'd spent my career kind of with other people's questions, and now I was being questioned. What do you most enjoy about it? How do you teach your students to do philosophy? Where did this passion come from? When you lost your father, how did that make you feel? Now, with this question, I remember being instinctually a little annoyed because I was a little raw, honestly, in that moment. And it seemed like a silly question. I lost my father as a child. I was sad. So I waited. So pause. He waited. There was this wait time. And in that wait time, I realized, oh, no, wait, actually there was something else. I was mad. I was mad because I remember my father had promised to bring me a gift, probably like a little plastic My Little Pony, but not only did he not come back, he didn't give me that gift. So that was just a weird little connection I made in the space of that wait time. Clever journalist. By this time, I'm starting to feel like this conversation is quite valuable. I'm starting to come out of my shell. I'm starting to feel heard and seen in a time when I was most vulnerable. He asks, what would you say to someone who thinks that the questions of philosophy are too tough for children? And so now I'm getting really fired up because I'm getting on my soapbox and I'm starting to share what I believe. What has working with children and big questions taught you about life? So we're making these grand connections. The conversation is feeling meaningful and powerful. He's asking creative questions like, if there were a movie about your life, which actress would you want to play you and why? Who would you want to play you in the movie of your life? So all of this questioning pulled me out. And I wondered, well, it seems so simple. What were those key moves that journalist did? He was an active listener. You're active listeners. I know this. You're doing this right now. He was patient. He was asking quality questions. These weren't like magical questions that only a few can learn how to ask. These were questions that might even come to you naturally. And this is key, and this is what you guys do. You're interested in that person's story. When you show with your body language and your micro messages that you believe, you take this learning stance, that I'm going to learn something from this person. When you look at a child and regard them as a wise being, what can I learn from this person? And that imbued me with this confidence. He published this article, and I remember it was almost like this magical moment as I read it, because here was the product of our conversation, things woven together. He had made connections that had emerged from questioning. And there was this last line where he wrote, "In the pain of her childhood loss, she wrestled with big questions, launching a lifetime of inquiry for herself and those around her." In a way, you might think of this relentless curiosity, this never-ending quest for understanding, as a father's gift to a little girl he never intended to leave. And in that moment, I was like, wow. The mirror was turned back, and I felt like there was a connection that had been made because of that questioning and that vulnerability and that listening. And I believe that everyone has big questions and everyone has a story to tell, and everyone has an idea and a gift that could change the world, and that we just need to listen and be interested and empower great questioning. And that we all have something. Maybe you have something that's a gift that needs to be unwrapped. And how can you unwrap that? How can we unwrap that for our students? Well, I think questioning. But we ask a lot of questions already. Teachers ask a lot of great questions. It says in the research that the typical teacher asks 200 to 300 questions a day, but that the majority are low-level, surface questions about facts or content, or they're procedural. I know I'm guilty of this. Because we have to get through the day. There's stuff to do. You can't be asking, what's the meaning of life? Why are we here? What does it mean to be human all the time? Your head would explode. But are we peppering in enough of those higher level questions? One of the big mistakes that I noticed in my own career and just observing is sometimes we just don't feel like we can make time. We've got tests. We've got to get the kids out the door, packed with their backpacks. We've got to get them to the assembly. So are we building in that time? I noticed how powerful it was for my students when we were making the time and space specifically for questioning. It doesn't even have to be a lot, 3 minutes a day. And just the little fun, you could call them gimmicks, to make the space feel warm and comfortable. Like we had this campfire, and it was almost like when the campfire came out. Well, then we knew it was questioning time, and we'd gather around, and the kids would go into this different space, and we'd have hot chocolate, and it was just like that delineation of this is going to be different. Let's engage in a different way. Let's be present in a different way. Bringing in curiosities from around the world to provoke wonder, books, toys, trough of pine cones. What can we bring in to provoke that natural wonder? Maybe we can try dialogue circles. In the Richard dialogue session coming up on Friday, we're going to dive into what this looks like, what the frameworks are, and how you can do this in a deeper way. Big mistake number 2, ask all the questions ourselves. This is one I've got to really sort of sit on my hands about, because I like a lot of questions, I like questioning, and I want to engage with questions, but I know that it's time for my students. It's not about me asking my great questions as the teacher. It's about their questions, inviting them to create questions, showing them with my body language and my micro messages that their questions are so important. Putting an answer on the board and saying, what's the question? You'll get a diversity of responses. I have been into questions for a long time, and I think I do a good job as a parent, but I wasn't doing enough, I realized, when I started this question journal with my son, James, just a couple weeks ago. And I thought, do you want to try a question journal? Because I've been doing this with my class for years. I didn't realize the contents of his mind was in this space. How can I build a time machine? How are volcanoes made? Why do balloons float and other things fall? How can I create my own magic trick? How can I make my own money-making robot? And here's this little person who's in my life every day, and I didn't know these are the questions in his mind until just giving that opportunity. Rather than, can you draw me a picture? And then you're going to get the sun and the house. But this was like a different level of provocation. Big mistake number 3 is no wait time. Now, a study found teachers' mean wait time after posing questions to be 1 second. I found this unbelievable when I first read this, because I thought, I know I give a lot of time. It seems like forever. But if you wait and see how long 3 seconds is, it's a long time. So you pose a question. What did you do after school? By then, you're already feeling like, come on, get to the answer. But if you discipline yourself to wait, you might get those answers for students who just really need that time to process. So I always try to remember to myself, slow down, wait 5 seconds. It's okay, because as I learned from myself, all those connections can be magical that happen in that wait time because of that wait time. So let's say we're doing this. We've got time and space. We're inviting them to ask questions. We're giving them this wait time. How do we go deeper? I don't know if this would be confirmed in your own experience, but I noticed this. The research says teacher education programs provide little, if any, instruction on how to build higher level thinking through questioning. Did anyone take a course in questioning? Has anyone gone deep into that? What is a question? How do questions work? What types of questions are there? If this is so great, why aren't we doing this? And I've heard from people, and I've thought to myself, well, maybe you just can't teach questioning anyways. Maybe you can't teach it. You just kind of do it. Is there anything you just can't teach? Is there anything that you just can't give a framework for? You just cannot define? You cannot give background for? Maybe you'd say, well, maybe something like transcendental meditation, you just have to do it. The Tao, martial arts. Well, if you go into a martial arts studio, you're still learning the moves, you're still practicing. You can still get a book, you can still read, you can still have things embedded in your mind that give you structure. I think that's the same with questioning. So that's where this crazy toolbox idea came from. I'm a visual person. I like to show up in a class and just plop something down and start to create the intrigue, not address it, just sort of let it be there. What's in the box, Miss Poirier? Oh, that's for later. No. When we're ready. Oh, and then they're freaking out. You just leave this on your desk for a week. It'll drive them crazy with questions. You don't even need to have anything in there. They're already just questioning like crazy. What is this? Now, who's heard this expression? If all you have is a hammer, anyone? Let's call it out. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Hammer questions are questions that have been used a lot in the history of learning and in education. These kind of coercive questions. Shouldn't you be walking nicely in the hallway? Are you going to wear that shirt today, Bob? No. All of those coercive questions. You find yourself get stuck in a pattern because this is the only thing in your toolbox. But there's all these other things. So I wanted to learn about what are the different kinds of questions, how can we add fun and variety and creativity and depth into our questioning? How can we open the toolbox? I've got in this download for you over 50 types of questioning tools and strategies, and you can download it, and each one has a picture of something to help you remember it, and it has a definition, and it has examples, because I believe we have to teach by example. And if we are trying to teach something and there is no example for it, I think we have to work harder. I think we can find examples for everything. So, as we go through some of these, what kinds of tools are there that you could create? Let's even think now. And by the way, everything in here is from around my house, the dollar store, secondhand store. There's nothing expensive about this. It's all stuff that you can just collect from under your sink. How would you create your toolbox? And what kind of question would this be? Well, what does a lock and key do? Maybe we'll call these close-ended questions. These are close-ended questions because there's a limited set of correct answers, maybe only one key. This is like converging on an idea. So an example might be, when did Canada become a country? What's 1 + 1? What color socks am I wearing? Now, what would this be? And imagine maybe you could do this with your students. You could just have a bunch of things out. Maybe you don't even know what the answers are. Just grab some tools from your drawer. What kind of question is this? What does a can opener do? Oh, it gives it away. Opener. Open-ended questions. They invite us to think, go divergent, imagine possibilities. So instead of, when did Canada become country, what does it mean to be Canadian? So creative, open-ended questions. One type of creative, open-ended question, maybe this paintbrush. Creative questions, they're a type of these divergent, open-ended questions. How would your ideal treehouse look? What changes would we need to make to roads, traffic laws, and city planning to accommodate flying cars? So now if you're wondering, what have I got on these little tags? I've just got the description of what I've called these, like creative questions, a definition, and then on the other side, a whole bunch of examples. But maybe if you did this, you wouldn't want to start with these. You just want to show the object and then have the kids brainstorm and create on their own. What would this be? Well, we call this one Sherlock questions. So you think about what kind of questions would Sherlock Holmes ask? So one's about the five senses. What are you missing? Thinking like a detective. What about this? A shovel. Digging deeper, getting to the root causes of things. We've got a compass here. And of course, you could define these in any way that you like. I just came up with these. I saw these and asked myself, what does this provoke me to think of in terms of questioning? So locating questions are formative assessment questions that help us figure out where we are now and where we need to go next. So things like, are there things in your life you want to change? If so, what? What challenge are you working on to overcome right now? Growth mindset questions. I had a hard time thinking about what this could be, so I just defaulted to a package of seeds, which I labeled growth mindset seeds. What lessons can I learn from this challenge? How could I grow this work to reflect my true potential? So what would it mean to have these kind of items in your classroom? Maybe you don't even need to speak to them. Maybe you just create like a library display and kids walk by. It's amazing how much learning can just happen by osmosis from the classroom as the third teacher, and the kids just exploring and seeing what's there. You might find them start to pepper in some of these into their experience. Ooh, the mousetrap question. What could this be? You don't want to get trapped in one of these. Loaded questions unfairly assume some information that has not been previously established. They may put the answer in a dilemma, which can feel like a trap. Like, have you stopped being a bully yet? Well, if you answer yes, if you answer no, you seem guilty either way. You want to be aware of these. There's all kinds of questions you might think of. Bridging questions, differentiating questions, leading questions. What's the difference between a leading question and a loaded question? You might want to know. Double-barreled questions. When you're asked two things at the same time, but you're inspired to give only one answer. How is that different from a loaded question? Sponge questions, where you're soaking everything up. Big picture questions, strategic questions, planning questions, questions of the heart, coercive questions, time-traveling questions, prediction questions, assumptive questions where you got your blinders on and you reveal something that you're not aware of by the type of question that you ask. Rhetorical questions, evaluative questions, questions of degree, evidence questions, hole punch questions, goal setting. So there's all kinds here, and obviously I won't read them all to you because you'll be able to see them in the book. This is something that came later to me, which was realizing that in this kit, I wanted to have clear in my mind, what's the difference between asking questions as a coach versus asking questions in a consultant role? Sometimes we conflate the two and we think that coaching is when you sit down with someone and you have like a pad of paper and you look like you're going to listen, and then they talk a little bit and then you tell them what they should do. That's not coaching, that's consulting. There's a place in this world for all of that. We need consultants. If I'm going to go do something really hard, like I want to plan my wedding or I want to redesign my house, I want to go to a consultant who's going to listen with care to my issue. They're an expert. They're going to give me advice and work with me to create a practical plan. But I'm going to go to a coach when I want someone to create a safe space to help me listen to my own inner teacher and to not impose their own advice and values on me, but to guide me back to myself. And so if I know the difference, and I'm aware of the difference, and I have these two hats I can wear in my class, and if my students know the difference, when we're doing our peer coaching, they'll know when to take on which role. And I invite my students to, you don't take on this hat unless your peer coaching partner has asked you to. Because nobody likes being told what to do unless they've gone to ask for it. So, that's that. Mirror questions can just be verbalization. So kind of when someone's talking and you just go, so, I see, you said blah, 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 blah. You just sort of mirror back what they have said. Let me see if I've got my example. So if you say, it was really hard at work today, someone might mirror back to you, it was hard at work today. So you can see that's a question, even though it doesn't have a big question mark at the end of it, it's interrogative in nature. You're provoking them to carry on. And micro messages, I didn't know how we were going to do that, but a little squirt bottle, you just think about how much power is in those subtle gestures, the tones of voice. And you know this, if you've been with somebody who makes you feel less than good about yourself or powerful. Maybe you were a kid and you had a teacher who made you feel very small. Maybe you had a boss or a supervisor who was saying all the right things. They were even saying coaching questions. But there's something about that subtle way of being that just told you they didn't really care. They were secretly coercing you into one viewpoint. So there's so much. And I mean, I'd love to have this on a staff and just to sort of be aware of, like, when are we doing what? And are we being aware of this? As a way to provoke discussion and make people become self-aware so that we can participate better in our staff meetings and be thinking about these things. Flattering questions, small talk questions. So what do you do? Okay, great. You know, I love this question you ask at a cocktail party, but they might not really have value or meaning. They might feel like a waste of time. Biased questions and discriminatory questions. Questions that assume things about people. We want to know what these are so we can avoid using them and not get trapped into them. Silence is another tool for the toolbox. We know how powerful that can be. Kipling questions, or 5 H's, should be 5 W's and an H. Who, what, when, where, why. Rudyard Kipling had a poem, so that's why he's sort of the namesake for this strategy. You can look that one up. The 5 why strategy, where you see little kids do this all the time. They ask you something, you give an answer. Why? But why? But why? But why? And the Toyota company used this in the 1930s as a way to get at what were some of their problems in their manufacturing, and it proves to be a good strategy. Typically, they were finding after 5 whys, you could get to the heart of a problem. Funneling questions. So this is something used by police detectives and journalists, sales representatives, this idea that maybe you start very broadly and you converge, you ask a series of questions and you converge to a finer and finer, more divergent or convergent point, or you go the other way. So I've got some examples of that as well in the book. Socratic questioning is another one. You might have heard this term, but what does it actually mean? So there's like a series of these specific kinds of questions that you can ask. We've got some examples in the book. Bloom's taxonomy, how many of you are familiar with this framework and have used it? So what I really like about this one, this idea that came up in the 1950s, is there's this lower level of thinking, so remembering, understanding, applying. We spend so much of our school time there. And then that higher level, the top of the triangle. The way I like to explain it to students is with this board game analogy. So for the lowest level, remembering, here's an example of what remembering question. Can you name a board game? Can anyone call out a board game? Monopoly, yes, right there. Excellent. Monopoly. Love that game, one of my favorites. How would you play Monopoly? Okay, so understanding the next level of question. How would you describe the rules of Monopoly? Like just summarize, recall, kind of moving up, but that show your understanding. So prove to me. That's one way we could test a kid on whether they understand Monopoly. Applying is when you actually get the kids to play Monopoly. Next level of question is analyzing. What are the similarities and differences between the board games in our classroom collection? Because you notice how they need to go through those bottom levels. They have to be able to remember, understand, and apply before they could do that comparing and contrasting, that analysis. The next would be evaluating which educational board game in our class collection is the best and why. Now they're being a judge. They need to have all that information from below, and then they can make a decision. And then at the top, creating. How could I design and build an educational board game to teach my classmates about what I've learned about astronomy? You can see the cognitive load increases as you go up. And it's also more interesting, more exciting. But I'm not in favor of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and saying we don't do any of the lower level thinking in our class at all. You need that stuff. Those are the building blocks. You need to have all of that stuff to build upon to get to those top levels. You just want to have that balance. So maybe you've gone through all this, and the students are aware that their own mental toolboxes are full. They've got all these ideas, and they're wondering, well, which question or strategy should I use? They'll start to popcorn out these ideas, and they'll start to be able to answer that. You'll see them say, I'm going to start with a locating question, and then move to a planning question, and then I need growth mindset questions to keep me on track with my project. How would you create and share your own questioning toolbox? Maybe make it discipline specific, so for whatever area you're working in. What new questioning tool could this be? I don't know, it's not in my box yet. Have kids bring in different objects. It's like a spatula, a flipper. You've probably got an idea for something you could put in your questioning toolbox that I haven't thought of. I've got 40, 50 things, but there are so many more. There's so many more types of questions. So now we get to the big question roadmap. So now that we can question, we know all these different kinds of questions. We know what makes a good question, when to use certain kinds. Think about, do you have a big question that's guiding your life, a big inquiry question? Some people might say, I'm not interesting, so I don't have a big life question. And that is a myth. Every single person in this room could come to a place where they realize, oh, this is the narrative. This is sort of like my own hero's journey. This is my quest that I'm on. We all begin life as curious children. That's something we have in common with all of history's greats. Do you guys recognize any of these kids? And if you call it out, if you recognize any name or face? Gretzky, good. Check it out, let's see. We've got little Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, Frida Kahlo, Wayne Gretzky. These were all kids in somebody's class at some point. They were all kids. Any kid in your class, you could be looking at one of these kind of photos where in the future it's like, oh my goodness, what did they become? That amazing, awe-inspiring power that we have to work with the future's great minds. So I think about, there was a time you were like this little photo. Who would you become? I think about this little girl, Jane. Does anyone recognize this photo of Jane? So Jane was a kid who very much loved animals. She was good in school. She was very good in school, but she got bored because she just wanted to be outside. She had all that energy. She snuck into the hen house one day, and she sat there watching a hen, and I'll have a quote from her biography. She says, I saw a round white object gradually protruding from the feathers between her legs. It got bigger. Suddenly she gave a little wiggle and plop, it landed on the straw. I had actually watched the laying of an egg. This was my first serious observation of animal behavior. I remember being puzzled about eggs. Where on a chicken was there an opening big enough for an egg to come out? I don't know if I asked anyone. If I did, no one told me. I decided to find out for myself. So Jane decided to go on this life of inquiry, keep asking her questions. She didn't have that outlet in school. Her family didn't have the money to get her to university, so she went into secretarial school, suddenly got a lucky break. She was invited through a friend connection to go to Africa. to study primates, and you might be realizing this connection of this little girl foretold by this picture. When Jane was a little girl, she was given this little stuffed primate, chimpanzee, by her father. It's quite stunning to realize that those little toys that kids carry around. I had a girl in my class who carried around foxes and was obsessed with foxes and drew foxes. I'm certainly going to regard that future animal behavior scientist with great awe and just think, what could this kid do? So Jane Goodall, it was right there. What are the things that your kids are interested in? What's it going to lead to? So Jane Goodall is now this amazing world's foremost primatologist and ethologist, and she's made great contributions. I had this girl in my class early in my teaching career, and I thought, gosh, she reminds me of someone. We can see these magical moments happening in our class. And what if we could sort of foretell where these kids were going to go, where we're going to go, using a map? And I've noticed that if you look at the history of people who've done these great, important, incredible things, you can kind of map their lives out according to this framework of questions. We all kind of start maybe in our youth, in our childhood, with questions that just kind of emerge from our feelings. It's just like, how do I feel about something? Why do animals act like they do? Just, you want to know. When I was a kid, I thought, why don't I feel seen and heard? And then you move on. So here's what the map kind of looks like. It's hard because we can't get that vertical alignment of this, but you can see it on the examples out in the hallway. So why do animals act like they do? Why can't I learn more about animals in school? What could I do to investigate animal behavior? What approaches and strategies should I use to study wild chimpanzees in their natural habitat to gain new insights about their capabilities? So as you're developing, you're starting to get increased clarity. And then moving into actualizing. We'll go into this in a second. We can look at this again with the Wright brothers as an example. So, Orville and Wilbur Wright, can you imagine having them in your class? They were buddies. They loved to hang out together. They were very close. So some of their first questions were things like, what can we learn together about the world? What are we going to do today? How are we going to play? How does that question grow over time? So they start to problematize. The problematizing stage is where you start to think, how can I turn this into a problem that I can solve? Go from a feeling into a situation where there is an issue. Why is human transportation limited to the ground? Now they're in the dreaming stages, they're older. How can we create an aircraft to fulfill our dream of human flight? Each of these questions sends you off in a direction towards solving this big issue that could be like a life's passion, life's dream. Then they're in the developing stage. What can we do to expand our knowledge of practical mechanics and advance the theory and state-of-the-art of flying? So if you have been engaging in inquiry projects with your students, you might face that issue of, you say, well, I'm going to need you to create an inquiry question because we're all about inquiry now. And they say, but my topic is just robots. Well, here you could show them an example of what it looks like to go through that process of taking robots as a topic to deepening it into a question over time that problematizes and starts to get a vision. And then, as they're about to launch into the sky, how can we design and build the world's first successful, heavier-than-air, powered airplane to achieve controlled, sustained human flight and revolutionize transportation on Earth? So when I think about what great minds of the past have done, the kinds of questions they ask, I thought, what about my own humble life? How could I use this framework and use what the greats have done in their own questioning process to sort of see how I could grow? So I made this question roadmap for myself. There's an example out in the hallway. I made one for friends and family. And as we did this process, this questioning, this almost like self-coaching, you start to realize, oh, there's a through line here. Even people who think, I don't have a life's question, I don't know what I'm all about. You can find it by going through this process and that magic of realizing, oh, there's meaning here. So I encourage you to maybe explore this framework. We've got it described in the download. And if you're wondering, what is the secret to making that final actualizing question? You could try this framework. There's no right or wrong way to do this, of course. It's just the roadmap is how you determine it to be useful for yourself. But I found that you can get a comprehensive look if you try using this XY formula. How can I do X to achieve Y, the result, so that Z? This might be something that you ask of your students. Whatever your final inquiry question is, make sure it hits X, Y, and Z. So you can see, it's hard to tell the green where it switches with the color here, but it switches from green to orange to red. So you can see how in Jane Goodall's and the Wright brothers' questions, they've got all those components. This was my question. So what could your big question be? Everyone here has a gift, a passion, an opportunity. And if you think you can't see it, if you feel like your life is just these disconnected, disparate dots and you just move from A to B to C, if you try unleashing your own innate power to question and you deepen it with these tools, you'll be able to see the through line. Our students will be able to see the through line. So maybe take time to go back in your mind, do a time traveling type question, and ask yourself, is there a question that I still have yet to answer? What is that question? How can I express that with greater clarity? How can I help my students to do the same? How can we unlock all of our gifts with questions? And when we've arrived at the question, the answer is already near. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.